The vastness of space stretched out endlessly, a sea of dark nothingness, where stars shone like distant diamonds. Among the countless celestial bodies, there was something that stood out, a massive starship, abandoned and floating aimlessly in the void. Its once majestic hull, designed by an ancient and highly advanced alien race, was now covered in scars. The Vektorians, the creators of the ship, had left it behind, deeming it useless after a catastrophic battle with an unknown enemy. For years, the ship had drifted through space, its systems failing one by one, its power waning with every passing day. The Vektorians had moved on, too proud to admit defeat, and too busy to care about the vessel that had once been their greatest achievement. It was abandoned, ignored, and left to fade away. But in the darkest corners of the galaxy, whispers began to spread of this derelict vessel, its potential still hidden beneath the layers of neglect and time. Word of the ship's existence reached Earth, where human curiosity and ingenuity had no limits. A team of explorers and engineers, led by Captain Sophia Anders, was assembled for a daring mission: retrieve the ship and learn from it. The human race, young and eager, had already accomplished great things, but the mystery of an abandoned alien starship was something they could not ignore. To the humans, it was more than just an opportunity. It was a challenge. They knew the risks were high, but so were the rewards. They gathered in the command room of their own starship, preparing for the unknown. Sophia Anders stood at the helm, her fingers tapping the console as she gazed at the star chart before her. The ship they were about to board was one of the largest and most advanced ever built by humanity. Yet the thought of facing a ship older and more advanced than anything they had ever encountered filled her with both excitement and dread. The journey to the derelict vessel would take several weeks, and the unknown dangers of space hung over them like a storm cloud. As they set course, Sophia couldn't shake the feeling that they were heading into a trap. Still, there was no turning back. It was too late for second thoughts. The journey through deep space was treacherous. The crew faced unexpected cosmic storms, rogue asteroids, and the constant threat of malfunctioning systems. But through it all, they pressed on, determined to reach their goal. When they finally arrived, the sight of the starship took their breath away. It was more magnificent than they had ever imagined. Towering structures covered in alien symbols, sleek designs, and strange materials that seemed to pulse with energy. All of it was beyond anything they had ever seen. The ship was huge, larger than any human-made vessel, and yet it was eerily quiet, drifting aimlessly through the emptiness of space, like a forgotten relic of a time long past. As they docked with the ship, the crew felt the weight of the moment. They were about to board a vessel that had once belonged to a civilization light years ahead of their own. What secrets would they uncover? What dangers lurked inside? Sophia gave the order to prepare for boarding, and with a mix of excitement and fear, they entered the abandoned ship. The air inside was stale, the faint smell of rust and decay lingering in the silence. The ship's systems had long since shut down, and only the faintest hum of dormant machinery could be heard as the crew moved cautiously through the hallways. The ship's size was overwhelming, and its design was unlike anything the humans had ever encountered. Curved walls, strange materials, and intricate alien technology littered the corridors. It was as though the ship itself had a mind, one that no longer cared for its creators or its purpose. It was a ghost ship, frozen in time. As they explored, the crew began to discover the ship's inner workings. The engines, once capable of bending the very fabric of space, were now cold and lifeless. The weapons systems, which could obliterate entire fleets, had long since been rendered useless. But there was still something about the ship that intrigued them, something that made them believe it was not entirely beyond hope. They found rooms filled with alien technology, control panels covered in symbols they could not read, weapons that looked far too advanced for humans to use, and a strange core at the heart of the ship that seemed to pulse with energy. It was as though the ship was still alive, its dormant systems waiting to be reawakened. Captain Anders knew that they had to find a way to restore the ship's power. They had come too far to turn back now. The team worked tirelessly, using every resource at their disposal. They had learned much from the wreckage of the ship, but the real challenge lay in figuring out how to bring it back to life. They studied the alien technology, trying to decipher its strange interface, and they worked with the tools they had brought along, hoping to bypass the ship's damaged systems. Days turned into weeks, and the crew grew more and more frustrated. The ship seemed to be mocking their every attempt to restore it. But then, something happened. A flicker of light from the ship's core. It wasn't much, but it was enough to fuel their hope. They had found something. Something that could work, something that could give them the power they needed. The ship, though abandoned and seemingly useless, was far from being beyond saving. With determination and human ingenuity, the team began to make progress. Slowly but surely, they began to bring the ship's systems back online. But as they worked, strange things began to happen. The ship's pulse grew stronger, its lights flickering to life. It was as though the ship was waking up, responding to their efforts. And then came the first sign that they were not alone. A low, ominous hum filled the air, and the temperature in the room dropped. The ship's systems were coming online, but something else was happening. Something they didn't understand. The crew's excitement quickly turned to fear. Were they really alone on this ship, or had something else been hiding in the shadows all along? As the lights flickered and the hum grew louder, Sophia knew they were on the verge of discovering something far bigger than they had imagined. The vessel might have been abandoned by its creators, but the mystery it held was just beginning. They had awakened something, a force, an entity, or perhaps the ship itself that had been dormant for centuries. What had seemed like a derelict ship was beginning to show its true power, and as the crew began to realize, they were no longer just exploring a forgotten vessel. They were now part of something much larger, something that had been lying in wait for a long time. The abandoned starship, once deemed useless, was now the key to unlocking a secret that could change everything. The true journey was only just beginning. The journey to the abandoned starship had been long and perilous, but the crew aboard the human ship Endeavor was more determined than ever. Captain Sophia Anders stood on the bridge, her fingers tapping restlessly against the armrest of her seat. Outside the observation windows, the infinite expanse of space stretched out, the stars twinkling softly in the distance. They were close now. The ancient alien vessel was just ahead, drifting through the void, its once proud form now a ghost of its former self. The salvage operation was about to begin. Sophia glanced at the crew around her, each of them filled with a mixture of excitement and uncertainty. They had never attempted anything like this before, boarding an abandoned alien ship so vast and so far beyond human technology. The prospect of finding alien secrets was tantalizing, but there was also the creeping fear of the unknown. What if the ship held dangers they couldn't understand? What if the crew wasn't the only thing waiting on board? There were no answers, just the promise of discovery, and that was enough to keep them moving forward. "Prepare for docking," Captain Anders ordered, her voice steady but filled with anticipation. Her crew responded immediately, each person falling into their duties with practiced ease. The Endeavor approached the derelict vessel slowly, its engines humming quietly as they aligned the docking bay with one of the outer ports of the alien ship. The starship was immense, its dimensions nearly incomprehensible. It loomed in space like a forgotten titan, covered in strange materials that shimmered faintly in the dim light of the distant stars. As the human ship made its final approach, the air was thick with tension, every movement on the bridge deliberate, careful. The docking procedure was flawless. The crew held their breath as the final seals engaged, securing the ships together. Once the hissing sound of the airlock confirmed that they had successfully docked, the crew exhaled in unison. It was time. Sophia gave the signal, and the first group of salvage experts, armed with tools, advanced into the airlock. The moment the doors slid open, the stillness of the alien ship greeted them. The interior was cold, eerie, with faint flickers of light from broken panels and damaged machinery. The scent of old metal and dust lingered in the air, a stark contrast to the clean, sterile environment of the Endeavor. Sophia led the way, her boots echoing on the metallic floor. As they ventured deeper into the ship, the sheer scale of the vessel was overwhelming. Corridors stretched far beyond the reach of their lights, and the architecture was like nothing they had seen before. The walls were curved in unnatural ways, with smooth, almost organic patterns. The technology was clearly far beyond anything humanity had ever developed, yet it was silent, dormant, waiting for someone to wake it up. The team worked quickly, setting up base operations in one of the massive control rooms that had once served as the heart of the ship. The displays were still functional, but only in a way that showed damage, flickering, unstable images and systems that seemed as if they might collapse at any moment. As the team started scanning the ship's various sections, they came across the ship's power core. It was unlike anything they had encountered before. It pulsed with a strange, low-frequency hum, as if it was still alive. The power was clearly unstable, but the humans saw a chance. They needed to get it working again, or this entire operation would be for nothing. The engineers on the team, experts in advanced technology, set to work immediately, trying to interface the alien systems with human technology. But the language of the ship was cryptic. They could understand some parts, but others were completely beyond them. Still, they pushed on, refusing to be deterred. Sophia watched as her team began to make progress. Slowly, they managed to stabilize some of the energy flows, restoring power to a small portion of the ship. Lights flickered on in certain areas, and the hum of dormant machinery began to grow stronger. It felt as if the ship was waking up, as if it had been waiting for this moment. The crew's excitement grew as they connected more systems, discovering that the ship still had life in it. They were not just salvaging alien technology. They were resurrecting a colossal, lost creation. However, as the crew advanced further into the ship, strange things began to happen. The doors they had passed through earlier were now locked, and systems that had been functioning just moments ago began to fail. It was as if the ship didn't want them there. The tension in the air grew thicker as the crew realized that their intrusion had not gone unnoticed. The systems seemed to fight back, shutting down key areas and blocking their progress. Sophia's team was forced to improvise, rerouting power and bypassing security measures that shouldn't have been there in the first place. It was becoming clear. This was no ordinary abandoned ship. Then, the unexpected happened. As they approached one of the central chambers of the ship, a loud mechanical screech echoed through the halls. The lights above flickered and died, and the temperature suddenly dropped. It felt as though the entire ship was alive, and it did not welcome the humans. The crew froze, weapons at the ready, their eyes scanning the darkness. There was something in the shadows, something they couldn't see but could feel, a presence that seemed to pulse through the ship itself. The hum from the power core intensified, and the lights above them flickered erratically. It was as though the ship was aware of their presence, and it didn't want them there. Sophia ordered the crew to fall back, but as they turned, the ship's corridors began to shift, closing in on them. The walls moved, almost imperceptibly at first, but enough to block their escape. Panic began to set in. What kind of ship was this? What had the Vektorians created? Was it alive? Sophia's mind raced as she tried to keep her team together. The ship's mechanisms were no longer simply malfunctioning. They were actively resisting them. The very walls of the ship seemed to be closing in, trapping them inside. They had come to salvage a treasure trove of alien technology, but instead, they found themselves in a fight for survival. The ship was no longer a derelict relic. It was something far more dangerous. And as the walls of the ship shifted again, blocking their way, Sophia realized they had made a grave mistake. They had awoken something far more powerful than they had ever anticipated, and they were not prepared for what lay ahead. In their desperation to reclaim what was lost, they had unleashed something far darker than they could have ever imagined. As the crew began to regroup and reassess their situation, The power core flickered one last time. A low rumble shook the ship, and the entire structure seemed to come alive. The vessel wasn't abandoned. It had been waiting for them. And now, the real test was about to begin. The Odyssey drifted silently in the void of space, its hull reflecting the distant light of stars. Inside, the crew prepared for the most ambitious mission they had ever undertaken. This was no ordinary salvage operation. This was humanity's chance to unlock the secrets of a long-lost alien civilization. The Vektorians. Their ship, found abandoned in a remote part of the galaxy, had been drifting for centuries. No one knew why it was left behind, or what kind of technology it held. But one thing was clear: if humanity could figure it out, it could change the course of history. The crew of the Odyssey would not just be exploring an alien ship, they would be exploring a path to a new future. Captain Alina Hargrove stood in front of the crew, her expression hard but determined. Her fingers brushed against the edge of the console as she gazed out at the derelict vessel in the distance. "This is it," she said, her voice steady but full of anticipation. "Prepare for docking. Stay alert. We don't know what we're walking into." The salvage crew, composed of engineers, scientists, and military personnel, moved into action. Their mission was simple: board the alien ship, assess its condition, and retrieve any valuable technology that could be adapted for human use. But as they approached the massive alien vessel, a strange sense of awe and trepidation filled the air. The ship, once magnificent, now appeared as a hollowed-out shell. Its exterior was smooth and seamless, with no visible markings, just intricate patterns etched into its surface. It looked like a work of art. Too perfect, almost too alien. Alina's ship docked effortlessly with the alien vessel, and the airlock engaged with a soft hiss. The crew suited up and made their way through the narrow passageway leading into the unknown. Inside, the ship was silent, eerily so. Their lights flickered over walls that shimmered in the dim glow, revealing surfaces that seemed to absorb the light rather than reflect it. The first thing they noticed was the strange, unsettling design. The corridors twisted in impossible angles, with no clear direction to follow. It was as if the very architecture of the ship was designed to disorient them. It was as if the ship was not just a vessel, but a living organism. As they moved deeper into the ship, they found signs that it had once been a bustling hub of alien life. Huge chambers with towering consoles stood still, covered in dust and debris. The air was stale, heavy with the weight of abandonment. Yet something about the ship felt alive. The hum of dormant machinery echoed in the distance, as if the vessel were waiting for something to awaken it. Alina and her crew moved cautiously, their weapons ready, but they didn't encounter any signs of life. Just technology. Alien technology, much of it far beyond anything humanity had ever encountered. "Look at this," said Dr. Miles, the lead scientist, his voice full of awe. He pointed at a strange console that stood at the heart of one of the control rooms. It was unlike anything they had seen before. No buttons, no levers, just smooth, almost organic-looking interfaces. Dr. Miles ran his fingers across the surface, and to his surprise, the console responded. Lights flickered, and a low hum filled the room. The team gasped, watching as holographic displays projected out of the console, showing alien schematics and blueprints. For hours, they combed through the ship, scanning data, examining technology, and cataloging everything. But despite their best efforts, they could not fully comprehend what they were dealing with. The technology seemed to operate on principles that defied their understanding of physics. Some systems appeared to be powered by energy sources far beyond what human science had discovered. It was as though they had stumbled upon the work of a race that had unlocked the very fabric of the universe, manipulating forces that humanity could only dream of. But with every discovery, the sense of unease among the crew grew. The ship seemed to resist their intrusion. At one point, as they accessed the central core, an entire section of the vessel suddenly sealed off. The walls around them shifted, the doors locking with a resounding clang. The low growl-like sound vibrated through the ship, and the lights went out. A cold sweat ran down Alina's back. Something was wrong. Something was happening that they could not explain. "We need to get back to the Odyssey," Alina said, her voice tight with anxiety. Now. But it was too late. The ship was already moving. They could feel it. It was no longer just an abandoned vessel. It was active. The walls around them seemed to pulse, shifting in and out of place, as though the ship itself was coming to life. Panels that had once been dormant now flickered with alien symbols, shifting and changing with an almost organic rhythm. The floor beneath them began to tremble, as if the ship were stirring from a long slumber. "Captain," said Dr. Miles, his face pale, "we've triggered something. The ship's systems are coming online. But it's too much. We can't stop it." Alina looked around at her crew. They were trapped inside a ship that was no longer a lifeless ruin. It was a weapon, a machine of unimaginable power, and it had just recognized their presence. As the ship's systems hummed to life, the crew began to panic. But Alina kept her composure. She had to. They had come for technology, but now they were caught in something far greater. "We have to understand it," Alina said firmly. "We need to access the ship's main control system. Maybe we can still shut it down." They moved deeper into the heart of the ship, using the information they had gathered to navigate through its increasingly hostile environment. The walls seemed to close in on them, shifting with every step, forcing them into claustrophobic corridors where their every move felt monitored. But just as they thought they had reached the core, the ground beneath them gave way. The floor crumbled, and they found themselves plummeting into a vast chamber deep within the ship. The room they landed in was unlike anything they had seen before. It was alive, throbbing with energy, glowing with an unnatural light. In the center of the room stood a massive, pulsing structure, like a heart or core of some kind. The ship's power was concentrated here, and it seemed to be feeding off their presence. It was clear now. The Vektorians had not just built a ship. They had created something far more dangerous, something that had been waiting for the right moment to awaken. "We need to get out." "Now," Alina said, her voice a command, but her mind was racing. They had only one chance left to stop this ship from fully coming online. They had come for technology, but what they had found was something else entirely, something far more dangerous than they could have ever imagined. With no time to waste, Alina and her crew made a desperate push toward the ship's core, using every bit of human ingenuity to survive the alien technology that surrounded them. As they fought their way out, they realized one truth. Human ingenuity was not just about building machines, but about surviving the very machines that others had built. And as the Odyssey finally made its escape, the alien ship, still alive, drifted once again into the silence of space. But now it knew one thing. Humanity had learned its secrets, and it would never be the same. The Nebula Explorer glided through the deep reaches of space, its sleek, powerful engines humming softly as the crew prepared for a mission that had consumed their every thought for weeks. They were on the edge of the unknown, venturing into uncharted territory to explore a mysterious alien ship. This ship, once thought to be a simple relic from a long-dead civilization, had revealed itself to be much more. Beneath its ancient, silent exterior, it harbored a secret. The crew had no idea what they were about to awaken, but they knew one thing. This ship held power beyond anything humanity had ever dreamed of. Captain Zora North stood on the bridge, staring at the alien vessel through the viewport. The ship's surface shimmered in the distant light of a nearby star, but it looked as though it was barely holding itself together. Its hull was scared, riddled with signs of decay and age. But even in its damaged state, Zora could feel the weight of its potential. This was no ordinary ship. It was something else entirely. "Prepare to dock," she ordered, her voice steady despite the growing tension in the air. The crew worked quickly, following their captain's instructions as the ship inched closer to the alien vessel. Every one of them knew the stakes. They were about to awaken something, and they had no idea what would happen when they did. The docking clamps engaged with a soft thud, and the crew, wearing their protective suits, stepped into the airlock. The moment the door opened, a cold, oppressive silence filled the corridor ahead. The ship seemed empty, lifeless, yet the crew felt an unsettling hum vibrating through the walls. It was as though the vessel was alive, waiting for something, or someone, to activate its dormant systems. "Stay alert," Captain Zora ordered, leading the way. "We don't know what we're dealing with yet." They moved deeper into the ship, their footsteps echoing in the silence. The ship's interior was unlike anything they had ever encountered. Strange, angular walls covered in symbols and patterns that seemed to shift and change with every glance. The air was thick with a sense of ancient power, and the further they went, the more they began to feel that they weren't just exploring a ship. They were trespassing on something sacred. As they entered a massive control room at the heart of the ship, the crew found themselves staring at a console that was unlike anything they had seen before. It was not a machine. It was a living, breathing entity, its surface rippling with light as though it had a heartbeat. There were no buttons, no levers, only a vast expanse of shimmering material that seemed to respond to their presence. Dr. Elias Kerr, the ship's chief scientist, stepped forward, his hand trembling slightly as he reached out to touch the console. The moment his fingers made contact, the entire room came to life. A surge of energy shot through the ship, and the lights flickered. A deep rumbling sound began to reverberate through the walls, and the temperature in the room began to rise. The crew exchanged nervous glances, their eyes wide with both fear and fascination. Something was happening, something they hadn't planned for. The ship was awakening. "Get back," Captain Zora shouted, pulling Dr. Kerr away from the console. But it was too late. The ship was already reacting to their presence, its dormant systems coming online with frightening speed. The entire ship seemed to hum with power, its once dead engines now alive and pulsing. In an instant, holographic images began to appear in the air, showing intricate designs, alien languages, and schematics of unknown technology. The crew watched in awe, struggling to comprehend the magnitude of what they were witnessing. Dr. Kerr's voice broke through the confusion. This is a weapon," he muttered under his breath, his face pale. "A weapon of unimaginable power." Before anyone could respond, the ship shook violently. A series of alarms blared, and the lights flickered once again. The crew scrambled to regain their balance as the walls around them seemed to shift, warping and bending like liquid. The entire ship was moving, changing, as if it were coming to life. The floor beneath them trembled, and the hum of energy grew louder, vibrating through their very bones. "We need to get out of here," shouted Lieutenant Aria, her voice tinged with panic. "The ship's systems are going haywire." But it was too late. The alien vessel had already begun to activate its core systems, and the crew was trapped in the heart of the ship as it began to power up. The ship's energy signature spiked, and suddenly, a massive blast of energy shot out from the ship's main reactor, shaking the very fabric of space itself. The Nebula Explorer rocked violently, as if it had been struck by a meteor, sending the crew tumbling to the ground. "Brace for impact," Captain Zora shouted, struggling to maintain control as the Nebula Explorer was thrown off course. The ship's hull groaned under the strain as the alien vessel released another surge of energy, this time directly at the Nebula Explorer. With every second, the situation grew more desperate. The crew fought to regain control of their own ship, while the alien ship powered up further, its core glowing with an intensity that threatened to burn them all. It was clear now that they were not just dealing with a derelict ship. They had unleashed a force that could destroy entire fleets. The alien technology wasn't just advanced, it was far beyond their understanding, and they were playing with fire. "We have to shut it down," Dr. Kerr shouted, his face filled with panic. "There has to be a way." Captain Zora's mind raced. She could feel the pressure of the situation closing in around them, but she refused to give in to fear. "We'll figure it out," she said firmly, "but we need to move quickly." The crew scrambled to understand the alien systems, their minds working together as they desperately searched for a way to override the ship's controls. The power fluctuations were intense, making it nearly impossible to focus. But after what felt like an eternity, they discovered something. A control panel, hidden behind a series of shifting walls, seemed to be the key to disabling the ship's power. With no time to waste, Captain Zara and Dr. Kerr worked together to access the panel, their hands flying over the controls as they tried to decipher the alien technology. The ship's systems fought them at every turn, but they refused to give up. Finally, with one last desperate command, they triggered a shutdown sequence. For a brief moment, everything went silent. The ship's tremors stopped, the power fluctuations ceased, and the glowing core dimmed. The crew, exhausted and battered, let out a collective sigh of relief. The ship had been deactivated, but the damage had been done. They had awakened a power that had been dormant for centuries, and they had seen firsthand what it was capable of. As the Nebula Explorer slowly pulled away from the alien vessel, the crew couldn't help but wonder what the full potential of that ship truly was. They had been fortunate to survive this encounter, but they knew one thing for certain. Humanity had only scratched the surface of an ancient, dangerous power that could change the galaxy forever. And with that realization, the true danger of what they had unleashed became clear. The alien ship was no longer just a relic. It was a weapon. And now, humanity had to decide how to deal with the incredible power they had stumbled upon. It had been years since the Vektorians left the galaxy, leaving behind nothing but rumors and stories of their immense power and cold, calculating ways. Humanity had long since grown accustomed to the idea that they were safe from the alien race's grasp. Life on Earth had flourished. Nations had risen and fallen, but the fear of the Vektorians seemed like an ancient myth, one too distant to be of any real concern. However, that peace shattered in an instant. The sky was pierced by a brilliant light, and a massive ship, unlike anything humanity had ever seen, appeared in the atmosphere. The Vektorians had returned. Captain Eli Harris of the Earth Defense Fleet was one of the first to respond. He stood in the command center of the fleet's flagship, the Vanguard, staring at the screen that displayed the dark, imposing shape of the alien ship. His heart pounded, his mind racing. For years, he had studied the Vektorians, but the data was scarce. They were a race that never revealed their true strength or intentions. Some said they had abandoned the galaxy to seek out new worlds to conquer, while others believed they had simply disappeared into the depths of space. What was certain was that their return could mean nothing but disaster. "Captain, they're not responding to our communications," reported Lieutenant Amira Blackwell, her voice tense. "They're just hovering above Earth's atmosphere. No signs of aggression yet, but I don't like it." Eli took a deep breath, forcing himself to stay calm. The Vektorians didn't communicate like normal aliens. They had their own methods, their own rules. Humanity had no idea what they wanted this time. But one thing was clear. The Vektorians were not here to simply visit. They were here with purpose. "We need to understand their intentions before we do anything drastic," Eli said, his voice steady despite the growing tension. "Prepare the fleet for a defensive stance, but hold off on any action. We need answers." As the days passed, the Vektorians did nothing but remain silent, their ship a constant presence in the sky. No communication, no movement, just an eerie waiting game. It was unnerving. Humanity watched from the ground, unsure of how to react. The world's leaders convened, discussing possible actions. Some wanted to strike first, fearing the worst. Others urged caution, hoping for peace, but everyone could feel the uncertainty in the air. Captain Harris spent sleepless nights analyzing the data they had on the Vektorians. Their technology was leagues ahead of anything humanity had. Ships that could bend space itself, weapons that could obliterate entire fleets with a single shot, and biological enhancements that made their soldiers nearly invincible. They had conquered planets, wiped out entire civilizations, and yet they had disappeared without a trace. Now they were back, and no one knew why. It wasn't until the 5th day of silence that the first signs of movement came. The Vektorian ship began to descend slowly, hovering just above the atmosphere. The air crackled with energy as they powered up their engines. The sky lit up with bright, colorful streaks of light as their massive ship seemed to communicate with something within the Earth's atmosphere. The entire planet felt the tremor of their presence as their ship began to pulse with intense power. "Captain, we have to make a decision now," Lieutenant Blackwell said, her voice urgent. "We've got a countdown on our systems. They're activating something. We don't know what it is." Eli's heart raced. This was it, the moment of truth. If the Vektorians had returned with hostile intent, they would strike now. But if they were here to negotiate, or for some unknown reason, they needed to act with caution. "Activate our defensive systems," Eli ordered. "We'll be ready for anything." The countdown continued, and the ship's energy began to intensify. It was clear now that something was about to happen, something beyond the crew's understanding. Eli could feel the weight of the moment pressing on him. He had led humanity through countless battles. But this was different. This wasn't a simple skirmish. This was the return of an ancient power, one that might erase humanity from existence if they were unprepared. Suddenly, the countdown stopped. The ship halted its descent. Then, without warning, a beam of light shot from the Vektorian vessel and struck the ground. The beam was not destructive. It wasn't a weapon. Instead, it seemed to act as a scanner, probing the Earth's surface, searching for something. As the light receded, the ship's engines powered down, and for the first time since their arrival, the Vektorians spoke. Their voice came through the fleet's communications system, clear but filled with an unsettling calm. "This planet holds what we seek," the voice echoed, deep and resonant. "You have two choices: surrender what we desire, or face the consequences." The message was brief, but the implications were staggering. The Vektorians had come to claim something from Earth, something they believed humanity possessed. But what could that possibly be? What could be worth the immense power they wielded? Eli's mind raced, searching for any clue that might explain their motives. "We don't have long," Eli said, turning to his crew. "We need to find out what they want. Fast." As the crew scrambled to analyze the message, the days stretched into an agonizing silence once more. The Vektorians did nothing, leaving humanity to wonder whether they had any time left before their next move. Everyone feared that the ship's next action would be one of destruction, but Eli refused to panic. He had to find answers. In the heart of the Earth Defense Fleet's command center, Dr. Maria Steele, an expert on alien languages and communication, worked tirelessly to decipher the Vektorian message. The alien language was complex and filled with layers of meaning, but Maria's knowledge allowed her to translate the most important part of the message. "The Vektorians are seeking something called the Core of Eternity," Maria explained. "It's a relic of ancient power, capable of unimaginable control over life and death. According to their history, it was lost during their last war." Eli's heart sank. The Core of Eternity. He had heard of such a legend. It was said to be a device capable of manipulating time, space, and reality itself, something far beyond human comprehension. If the Vektorians had come to claim it, they would not hesitate to destroy the Earth to obtain it. "Prepare for the worst," Eli ordered, his voice filled with grim resolve. "If they want the core, we will not let them take it." The next few hours were filled with tense preparations. The Vektorian ship loomed overhead, a constant reminder of the impending storm. But as the crew readied themselves for a possible confrontation, something unexpected happened. The Vektorians transmitted one last message. "You have 2 days," the voice echoed again. 2 days to deliver the Core of Eternity to the designated location. Fail, and we will take it by force. The countdown had begun. Humanity had 2 days to find the core and prevent disaster. The crew of the Vanguard knew that every second counted. The stakes had never been higher, and failure was not an option. They had to act fast, or the galaxy would soon witness the return of an unstoppable force, the Vektorians, and their unimaginable power.